The wheels meet the runway first, but the real work happens just above them, hidden inside metal most passengers never think to look at twice, or even think about at all. In that instant, the full weight of an Airbus A350, roughly 283 tons, fully loaded with passengers, cargo, and fuel for a long journey, stops being carried by air and starts being carried entirely by metal. That transfer happens in a fraction of a second, again and again, for years on end, without the aircraft ever knowing it happened, without a single passenger feeling anything more than a gentle bump on the way to the gate. Somewhere in England, in a quiet industrial building outside Gloucester, that entire outcome was decided years before this particular jet ever left the factory floor, long before anyone booked a seat on it or checked a bag. Let's get into it right here on Small Things. Not just a set of wheels. Every main landing gear fitted to every A350-900 flying today was assembled and released from that one facility in Gloucester, nowhere else on the planet. It's tempting to picture landing gear as an oversized version of a car's wheels, bolted underneath something much heavier and left to do the same simple job. What actually sits under the wing is closer to a small, purpose-built machine in its own right. At its center is the bogie beam, a long titanium structure that carries the wheel axles and tips forward on a pivot pin the instant the wheels touch down, letting each wheel meet the runway at the correct angle instead of slamming flat all at once. The beam isn't just holding weight up, it's actively managing exactly how that weight arrives. Built to survive a number, it did not begin with a wheel or a beam at all. It began with a number the whole design had to survive before a single piece of metal was ever cut on the shop floor, a number set years in advance by engineers who would never personally see most of the aircraft it eventually flew on for decades to come. This particular landing gear, the largest Safran builds anywhere in the world, is engineered to go around 14,000 landings, roughly 12 years of continuous service on a busy long-haul route flying multiple times a day before it comes off the aircraft entirely for a full overhaul and to last about 36,000 flight cycles across its total working life from first delivery to final retirement. Every decision that follows from that starting point, the metal chosen, the shape machined into it, the way it eventually gets tested under real stress, exists to answer one specific question. How do you build something that can absorb that many individual landings without any single one of them being the one that fails? The titanium bogie beam starts as raw stock considerably larger than the finished part and gets machined down through a long sequence of operations carried out over several days at the facility, some of it cutting 6 components on the same machine at once, some of it boring deep internal passages long enough that a technician can look straight down them and see daylight at the other end. Titanium doesn't cut the way steel does. It's tougher on the cutting tools, considerably slower to machine through even with modern equipment, and a lot less forgiving of error, which matters enormously on a part this large, since a single mistake doesn't get quietly hidden away under a coat of paint later on in the process. Every finished surface eventually gets checked against the original engineering drawing on a dimensional measuring machine. Confirming the completed shape matches the design to a tolerance most people never think to ask about on something this genuinely large and heavy before it's ever allowed to move on to the next stage of production entirely. The paradox at the center. Making the metal harder sounds like the obvious answer to that survival problem, and it's precisely the wrong one taken too far. Harder metal resists denting and surface wear better, but push hardness past a certain point, and that same metal becomes brittle instead, more likely to crack under repeated stress rather than absorb it and flex. A landing gear axle that cracks doesn't fail quietly on its own. Everything downstream of it, every part relying on that axle holding, fails right alongside it. The real target isn't maximum hardness at all. It's a specific, carefully calculated balance of hardness, toughness, and fatigue resistance together, strong enough to carry the load, flexible enough to genuinely survive that load being applied thousands of times over the years without weakening. That balance gets set through heat and a rapid, carefully controlled cooling process. The finished component gets heated to a precise temperature, then quenched directly in oil, cooling fast enough to lock the metal's internal structure into exactly the state engineers actually need, not too hard, not too soft, not somewhere unpredictable in between. Get that single step wrong in either direction, and everything carefully machined before it stops mattering entirely. Even a properly heat-treated part can still hide a flaw invisible to the naked eye, and that's the exact problem liquid penetrant inspection exists to solve on the factory floor before final assembly and shipping. Technicians coat the entire bogie beam in a colored dye, let it sit long enough to seep into anything resembling a crack or a hidden flaw, wash the surface completely clean, then dust it with a fine developer that pulls any trapped dye back out to the surface for inspection. Under ultraviolet light, anything that bled back out glows brightly, tracing the exact outline of a defect far too small to see under ordinary daylight. A part with nothing to hide passes clean under the lamp. A part with something genuinely wrong shows it right there in front of the inspector before it ever gets anywhere near an actual aircraft. What testing actually proves. It's tempting to assume a landing gear this heavily inspected and tested must be effectively indestructible, incapable of ever failing once it's cleared every single check along the way to certification. Testing and inspection reduce risk and confirm a part meets its exact design requirements. They don't rewrite the underlying physics of metal fatigue or guarantee that failure is somehow physically impossible from that point forward. Full-scale structural rigs push components well beyond ordinary landing loads, up toward the limit and ultimate loads engineers deliberately design around, precisely because knowing exactly how much a given design can genuinely withstand is what actually keeps a landing gear reliable across thousands of real landings. It's also easy to assume a landing gear's reliability comes down entirely to the quality of its individual materials, as though the metal itself is doing all the real work. How that force actually gets distributed across the gear matters just as much as what the gear happens to be made from. The bogie beam's pivoting action doesn't just help each wheel meet the runway at the correct angle, it also spreads a single massive impact across two wheels and two struts at once instead of concentrating that force through one rigid point. A landing gear built from flawless material but forced to absorb an entire touchdown through a single unmoving joint would still be at a real disadvantage compared to a system engineered to share that load across several points at once, the way this one actually does. Where the work actually lands. Bent over an open bore in a half-finished bogie beam on the shop floor late in a shift, with machines still running steadily nearby and the smell of cutting fluid in the air, a technician runs gloved fingers slowly along the machine surface, feeling carefully for anything the eye alone might miss before the part moves on to the next station further down the line. Inside the test facility on a gray afternoon with rain against the windows outside, a rig built to clear the height of a small building slowly loads a landing gear with forces equivalent to several loaded airliners stacked directly on top of each other, confirming on paper exactly what will eventually happen for real on a runway somewhere years from now, long after this specific test is finished and forgotten. 12 years after a specific landing gear first goes into service somewhere in the world, flying millions of miles across dozens of different routes and countries, it comes off the aircraft entirely, gets shipped back to Gloucester on a truck for a full overhaul, and gets checked down to its individual components one at a time before anyone signs off on sending it back out into service again. Somewhere at a departure gate on an ordinary weekday afternoon, surrounded by tired travelers checking their phones, an engineer glances up briefly at an A350 lifting off into the evening sky, quietly aware of the exact facility and sometimes even the exact bogie beam that made that specific departure physically possible that day for hundreds of strangers. Controlling the force, not resisting it. The A350's landing gear doesn't survive 14,000 landings across its working life because it was built as rigid or as hard as engineers could possibly make it. It survives because every single part of it is built to manage force rather than simply resist it outright, sharing the load across the bogie beam and its pivot, absorbing repeated stress without turning brittle, and revealing the smallest hidden defect under a UV lamp long before it ever becomes a real one out on the runway somewhere far away. What looks like a collection of titanium struts and wheels is really a carefully balanced system built around a single idea, refined over years of testing and real service across thousands of actual flights. Strength in aviation doesn't come from refusing to move. It comes from controlling exactly where the force goes. If this changed the way you look at a landing plane the next time you happen to fly somewhere yourself in the coming months, let us know in the comments below what you want us to explore next in a future video. We might make it our next episode. Thanks for watching. History often hides in the smallest details.